Okay, welcome back to the podcast. I have been MIA because not only has my mom was here, I was sick repeatedly, my son started school again, but truthfully, TikTok's been a wild ride, and I've been putting so much content on TikTok, sometimes like 6 videos a day that are like 6 to 10 minutes long, that it's kind of taken up majority of my time. And I keep having people ask me when I was going to drop the next podcast. So here I am. I'm being the responsible person and doing the things I said that I was going to do. I think part of me has been struggling with what's been going on TikTok, because when you get inundated with so many men who are so fucking angry and so hell bent on misinterpreting what you're saying, I almost, at first, I felt this like need to defend myself, and I was jumping into like defensive mode and trying to explain myself and rationalize and justify everything that I was saying. And then the more I sat with it, the more I was like, you know what, fuck you guys. Like fresh and fit, all these men with podcast mics that say the most unhinged things never feel the need to defend themselves. And that, I think, is part of my frustration, is like they can say whatever they want, they can do whatever they want, and there was no real pushback. And that like roots me more into feminism, but also like understanding feminism more and like deconstructing things, as you can see, has been actually like mentally exhausting to like see all these systems and see how they like do this and they all like interact with one another, and then you get men commenting and you're like, I just know you don't even know how to clean your asshole. And I'm having to like sit here and somehow justify like my thoughts or feelings or opinions with statistics. And sometimes I get so frustrated with even like the statistics thing, where like these men will say things and then they're like, cite your source. And you like cite it and then they just completely ignore it. And I'm just like, it goes back. I made a pod. I think I've talked about this. Like, how do you argue with stupid? Like, how do you justify to stupid? And I just don't think you can at this point. I've gotten to this place where I'm like, stupid is what stupid does. Like, they're just so dense, and these people vote. And I remember, I think it was the 2016 election. Like, I went to school for political science pre-law. I really wanted to be a lawyer, and I remember I had been out of school for a couple years, and that's when Trump was running. And I remember looking at the odds if I had placed bets on Trump, and it was like $20 would win you millions of dollars. And I was like, Trump would never get elected. And when he got elected, it was truthfully when I stopped paying attention to politics. Like, I completely checked out. I had so many things going on in my own life that I was like, I can't be concerned with this anymore. Like, there's too many dumb people in the world. And then it wasn't until Roe v. Wade got overturned that I was like, okay, I should like throw my hat in the ring and care and say things. And I've read all these books and, listened to all these people talk and deconstructed, and you do all of this. And sometimes I like ignorance sometimes feels so much more blissful. I feel like when I was so concerned about what was going on in my day to day, or even like being concerned about boys and men and like dating, like that was sometimes so much more, like it was emotionally draining, but it was also just like so not deep. Like, being concerned about men or being concerned about dating can be like emotionally draining in the moment, but it's so shallow, the concern and like the experience. And even though it can feel huge when you're feeling the emotions, like on a like grand scale of your life, it's so minuscule. But in caring about what's going on in the world, that feels macro. It feels so draining emotionally to know that this is going on and really like not be able to do a ton about it. And there's been a lot of people in my comments lately talking about how I do nothing, and I'm like, well, yeah, like really, like it feels like, And even though I get DMs from women and women comment, sometimes it feels like you're kind of just screaming into the void, all these things and thoughts and feelings and opinions. And it doesn't really matter. But then you get a DM and someone says it does matter. And you're like, okay, maybe this does matter. And maybe, but then also and I know this is going to be like all over the place, but I also sometimes just feel like so irrelevant in some ways that like I can say all these things, but at the end of the day, does it truly, truly matter? Is it truly going to make a change? And I hope it does, because all of the Fresh and Fit podcasts, all of the bullshit that goes with it, like that stuff has changed things drastically. It has emboldened people. They're being more open and saying things that they were thinking out loud, and it's emboldened other people. And so sometimes I think about that and I'm like, okay, maybe it will help. Maybe it will make somewhat of a change. The other comment I've been getting a lot lately has been from people saying that I'm chasing clout, chasing money, chasing all these things. And I find it interesting because when we have this conversation about clout chasing or, money and people monetizing off of these issues, no one has issues with the men who do it. Like Fresh and Fit were on their podcast on YouTube crying, like emotionally, like crying and having a fit over the fact that they were demonetized, and all of their, followers were like empathizing with them. But they've been monetizing off of harming women. And when I talk about harming women less, I get people, and even women, like pick me women, going and telling me that I'm horrible for monetizing my platform, even though I'm in Canada and I don't make any money off the Creator Fund. And I sat back and I made a video the other day that I ended up deleting because I was like, I've really only gotten clients from either referrals or my Instagram. I don't get a ton of clients from TikTok. I think I've gotten one in person in Edmonton from TikTok, which was happenstance. She saw my TikToks and happened to live in the same city. And I think a woman and her husband signed up for training that also lived in my area from TikTok, and 2 other girls. So maybe 5 people in the 8 years I've been a personal trainer have genuinely truly signed up for training because of TikTok, even though you have 63,000 followers. And I think that's also a conversation that can be had is people think, 60,000 people. When I first started out, that would have seemed so big to me, so huge. And then you start making content and you realize it's not that many people. It is, and you appreciate it. And I appreciate all the people that support me. But also, 60,000 people is not a lot on the scale of influencers and people with clout and people with followings. And you feel this when you meet other influencers, because I've been to so many influencing events now that it's 10 to 20,000 is cool. 50 to 100K is cool. But it doesn't mean anything in the realm of influencers until you're hitting probably 750 to 1 million followers on TikTok, where people start to care and notice and recognize and all of that. And even when you go into influencer events, people will ask you what type of content do you make? And being in these influencer events and seeing how many people are influencers, you realize there's so many niches, and within each of the niches, there's so many different types of influencers that when you go to influencer events, some people might know each other because they might be a fitness influencer who really follows crafts, or a fitness influencer who maybe follows outdoor content. So they'll see someone and they're like, oh, that influencer is somebody who's cool and I know them and I recognize them. But a lot of the times, influencers don't necessarily have overlap. There's people who have hundreds of thousands of followers that I've never heard of, or someone will mention an influencer and I'm never heard of them, because our circles don't run together and you don't see them. So when you go to these influencer events, there'll be people with millions of followers that I've never ever in my life heard of before. So like they're just another person to me. And I remember I went to one event in Vancouver, and I was standing there with some people that I had just met because I didn't know anyone. And they were like, "Oh my God, that influencer is so cool." And they're talking about how influencer is so cool and means something to them. And so I was just standing there. I'm like, "Do you want me to go say hi?" And they're like, "No, you can't. You couldn't do that. Like, no, it's okay." And they were like acting all embarrassed. And I was like, "It's fine. Like, that's just a person to me because I don't know any of their following." So I just went up to the person and started talking to them and then introduced and like connect people. But I think one thing is like, having now been kind of in the influencer sphere and met so many influencers with so many like such a wide variety of followings, is that these people are people, just like anybody else. When I lived in Vancouver last in 2011, I had a roommate who's really obsessed with fitness influencers, which I have never really followed a ton of fitness influencers, but she asked me to go to a fitness expo, and we stood in line because she really wanted to meet Dana Lynn Bailey. And I didn't know who Dana Lynn Bailey was, but I stood in line with her, and we stood in line for 2 hours. And Dana Lynn Bailey was late because her and her partner were taking pictures with people in the hallway on the way to the event. So we're standing in line to meet these people, and they're taking photos with everyone. Like, we didn't even have to stand in line. We could have just been in the hallway. We would have gotten photos with them. So they get up, and me and my roommate walk up to them after, like, you know, we finally get our turn. And my roommate just stands there and stares at them with this big grin on her face. And I was like, I don't know anything about this girl. But the only thing that I had ever heard, when I was looking her up before we went, because it was like, I should probably know something, there was a girl who had tagged Dana Lynn Bailey, and she was like, "Oh, when I met Dana Lynn, I asked her, like, should I be a bikini athlete or a figure athlete?" And Dana said that I should do this one. So that's what I did, and it's been such a good decision. And that was the first thing that came to my mind. So I'm standing there and I asked this girl, I'm like, I'm debating competing. Should I do bikini or should I do figure? She looked at me like I had a third head, and she was like, "I think you should do whatever you think you should do." And I was like, okay. And it was the most awkward interaction I've ever had with a human being in my entire fucking life. And I remember leaving that, and in my head I was like, because we missed the show, I wanted to watch bikini athletes, we missed them. And I remember sitting there thinking, like, I will never ever do this again, where I stand in line to meet another fucking human being as if this person is not exactly like me. Like, I do not ever want to pedestalize someone, especially not because they have a large social media following. I will be the equal to them, meaning like I will always be like a person the same way that they're a person. And so going to these influencer events is so weird because I feel like a lot of people pedestalize influencers even when they are influencers, but I very much acknowledge that all these people are just fucking people. Recently I got invited as a +1 for like a fashion show. It was just this past weekend. Went to this fashion show with my influencer friend, and I'm sitting there and I was like, I think that's Lights. And like, I was such a fucking hardcore Lights fan in high school into university. I actually saw her in university, and I texted my sister and I'm like, oh my God, Lights is here. And I was like, I'm gonna go to the bathroom. And when I got back, Lights was like coming out around the stage as I was going this way. And I was just like, oh my God, are you Lights? And she's like, oh my God, yeah, like da da da. And I was like, oh, I saw your concert. Like, she was so nice, so sweet, right? But it was one of those moments, those like full circle moments where I was like, I met this singer that I think the world of, that I love her music, and I met her as a fucking equal because we were both just two people at an event. And that is what I strive for in my life, is to not pedestalize people because I think that they're someone, and just like meet people as other people, as human beings. And I have like a lot of mutuals on TikTok, and one of the things that I try and do is like, someone who follows my back and I'm like, oh my God, thank you so much. Like, I love your content. Like I there's so much of the influencer realm that I'm trying to go into as more like open and kind, because everyone is so connected. But I also find that when I go into these spaces, it's hard because people will be like, what kind of content do you make? And I'm like, I just make men really angry on the internet. I don't know what it is. Even if I make fitness content, men get mad at me. If I make like feminist content, they get mad at me. If I talk about men's rights, they'll get mad at me. Like, there's quite literally not a single thing that I've ever been able to post where men didn't somehow get mad or upset with it. Even if it was, and that's one of the things is, I've talked so much to men before about posting stuff, and they're like, women can gain followers so easily, they just have to post their ass. And I was like, okay, yeah, I totally bought into that because men said that. And I was like, that's totally true. Totally. I totally believe that. So that's what I did for a while. I was posting all these bikini and all this stuff. And, you know, men couldn't predict this, I guess, the same way I couldn't predict it, but it makes men mad. When you post your body, especially if they can't have access to you, it makes them angry, and you get stalkers, and you get people who get like form this parasocial relationship with you where they feel like they know you when they've never met you, they've never had a conversation with you. And although you can appreciate people following you because they love your perspectives, I would also say like everyone shouldn't pedestalize people, you know, regardless of what kind of content they make, even if they make the type of content I make, like, and talk about feminism and women's rights and all these things, like, because they're people. I'm a human being. There's people who fucking hate me, and there's going to be more people who hate me, and there's, you know what I mean? Like, you're a human, you make mistakes, you're not perfect, you can't know everything. And I don't know where this was going. I just know that I've been just in this really weird headspace as of lately when it comes to social media and content creation, and people taking my words so seriously, but then also like getting so mad, but then also just being like so appreciative, and like I can feel the pedestalization, and I don't, and it's not that I don't appreciate people following me and listening to what I have to say, but I've always feared being put on a pedestal, because I feel like the only place to go is down. Like, the only place you can go is fall. And even when people comment like, oh, like, you've never posted a take that I don't like or I don't agree with, and I'm like, oh, just wait, like, there'll be something. I know it, because I'm a human being and I can't know everything and be perfect. And I think that there's a part of me that's been a perfectionist in the past that is somewhat kind of panicking over that. And why I had a hard time even posting fitness content for a long time. And is because this fear of failure, but also fear of success. Fear of success has been a huge demotivator in my life. Is like, I want to do well. I want to, you know, succeed and help other people. But if I fail, that is far more scary to me. If I succeed, that is just as scary to me as failing. Because failing is like one thing. People see you fail. Like, I quit university, I quit all these things, and I've never been one to be super scared to like break up with someone or end things. But when it comes to succeeding, that is where like my big issues are around, is like fear of success. And I think that needs to be talked about more, because I think that might be gendered. I think that there's some gender things there going on, and like socialization and how we teach boys to go throughout the world versus how we teach women to go throughout the world. Women have to constantly prove themselves, and men can kind of just go through. And I fear the day that I fall from the pedestal.